I just felt the transformational effect of that, just that moment. And that's never been something I've really experienced before. And so trust the process. Trust the people that love you, that are encouraging you to go.
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
Hey, welcome back to the Crucible Podcast. My name is Joy Dunning, and I'm one of your hosts. I'm here today with father-son duo Kevin Thompson and Nathaniel Thompson. Hey guys, you want to say hi?
Hi, Joy. This is Kevin. Good to be here.
Hello, this is Nathaniel. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thanks for both being here. I appreciate your time. So today we're going to be jumping in and talking about what it has been like for you as a father and a son to both attend a weekend and what that journey was like to even get you both on a Crucible retreat and kind of dive into that story a little bit. So Nathaniel, I'm going to start with you because you attended a weekend first, correct?
That is correct. I attended my first weekend. I actually have the email still. I pulled it up on my email. I attended my first weekend late November. It started Friday, November 30th, 2018.
Okay, so that was, from what I understand, you were at college at the time in Texas, correct?
Yes, that is correct. I was attending a Bible school called Sunset International Bible Institute in Lubbock, Texas. It's a really small Bible college that actually operates within a large church building. And that was actually the community that got me connected to the Crucible Project. So.
Okay. So what did that look like, getting you connected in?
Oh, wow. Well, it looked like a couple of classmates of mine and some members at the church building that were affiliated with the Crucible Project. Just hearing some of the things that I was sharing while going to school, I had opened up and shared some things that I was wrestling with at the time, especially even regarding my faith. And some of these fellow classmates that were associated with the Crucible Project honed in on that and started approaching me saying, hey, there's this really neat organization called the Crucible Project. And I'm not going to lie, the first time I heard about it, I was really guarded and not interested at all because they kept using the word accountability. And at the time, I was not a big fan of that word just because of some experiences I had had with some of the church background I come from. Just was not interested hearing that word. But God, in his timing, kind of led me to a place where I came back from a summer internship in Oklahoma. I came back to school. And I said to these classmates, okay, I think I'm ready to go.
Yeah. So what was it that led you to feeling ready to go?
Yeah. So I reached a place where I realized it was kind of like do or die when it came to addressing some issues that were prevalent in my life that I was really wrestling with. So just to give some context, I was interning with a church in Oklahoma during the summer of 2018. And during that internship, I had gotten really deep into a struggle with pornography. And that was something that was just eating me up from the inside out because here I was, this, Bible student at a Bible college that was working with this amazing church, and everyone at the church was just blown away and super encouraging by the work that I was doing. So on the front, the facade of my life looked like this really put together young Christian man who had a lot of Bible knowledge and was just a really good example. But then when I'm sitting alone, I'm struggling with depression, I'm struggling with sexual addiction, and I felt like I was the wolf in sheep's clothing. And so I actually reached a place where I was seriously contemplating taking my own life. And my wife was actually gone one weekend. And sorry, I gotta kind of compose myself a little bit. Just the thought of knowing that she would come home to finding me was what kind of stopped me in the moment, and it bought me enough time to go back to school and open up to my wife, open up to fellow classmates, saying, "Hey, I need help. I need help."
Yeah.
And so those fellow classmates were what pointed me to the Crucible Project, and that's some of the context that led me to attending my first weekend and kind of getting over that immediate hurdle of accountability.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. I really appreciate your vulnerability with that. And your story is not, it's unique to you, but it's not the first time that we've heard people say that. It seems like a lot of times when people come on a weekend retreat, it's because they reach that breaking point in their life where they are looking at what their actions are versus what's going on behind the scenes that others don't see. And you can only live in that tension for so long. And then you reach that point where it's like, I gotta do something. So I just want to honor you for making the choice of not having that something that you did be destructive, and instead taking a step into finding new freedom and saying, what I'm doing isn't working and I'm ready to do something different. So yeah, just thanks for
Thank
the
you,
work that
Joy.
you've done.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So fast forward just a little bit. So you went on a weekend, and
Yeah.
as we know, it's not like the magic pill that cures everything. You don't
Right.
walk away from on a Sunday night going, "I'm healed. I mean, everything's perfect." But it starts you on that journey. So can you tell me just a little bit, maybe in the first couple of weeks, if you remember, or even just as you left your weekend experience and re-entered real world and the demands of life once again. What was that like for you, and how did the work that you did on the weekend follow you into those coming months?
Yeah. So I think for me, one of the things that I was hesitant about with the weekend was just that whole concept of the spiritual high. You go to a retreat, you go to, a Christian camp, and you experience this spiritual high, and then when you come back to reality, it all just kind of disappears and goes away. The Crucible was kind of unique for me in the sense that when I got back home, it had actually given me some very real tools that I could apply in my relationships and my communications with people. And furthermore, because there was some community associated with the Crucible Project when I came back to Lubbock, came back to school in Lubbock, I was able to kind of get plugged in to that group of men and just stay connected in a communication that centered around encouragement, loving on each other, and just being open and raw with each other.
Mm.
It was interesting though, because once I finished school at Lubbock, or in Lubbock, I ended up moving with my wife to Seattle, Washington, and I served on a church planting effort that lasted about 2.5 years. So during that period when we moved to Seattle, I actually got unplugged from the Crucible community. The only way I really stayed connected was on Facebook. And it was kind of interesting for me because over, let's see, Seattle would have been 2019 to 2021-ish, kind of during that tumultuous period of COVID and the turmoil that was kind of hitting our country in 2020. I actually kind of got turned off a little bit by what I was seeing with the Crucible Project,
Mm.
in terms of the Facebook conversations and dialogue that was happening. So I actually disconnected a little bit from, well, I shouldn't say a little bit, right? I'm using some modifiers there. I disconnected from the Crucible community on Facebook, and it wasn't until I guess it was late late 2021, early 2022 that I moved with my wife back to Missouri, where we are originally from. And once I moved back to Missouri, I knew that I needed community. I knew I needed, a close fellowship with fellow men. So I kind of started my own effort at building deeper relationships within the church body that I had in Missouri. And that was doing really well and going really well. But then I caught wind from a friend of mine that the Crucible Project was going to have its first St. Louis area-wide weekend retreat. And so then that's when I was like, okay, hey, guys, I'm inviting you to go to this, and I decided to staff that weekend, and that kind of got got the ball rolling for me reconnecting with the Crucible, because even though I had been disenfranchised by the Facebook side of things, I still knew the in-person presence, experience with the Crucible Project was worth it. It's definitely worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I'm glad you got reconnected and dove back in. So let's turn a little bit now towards your dad, because when you went on your initial weekend, you had your experience, you came back, and then from what I understand, your dad, and then you have a couple brothers as well, that you started to tell about your experience to. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I the first the first weekend I staffed in St. Louis, uh, the closest family I had that went to that one was a brother-in-law. And it
Okay.
was actually that brother-in-law, correct me if I'm wrong, Dad, but it was actually that brother-in-law that came back from his experience and relayed what he had learned, and gained from it with you, that got you to be like, okay, I think I'm going to go to this. So it was the second kind of Crucible weekend affiliated with our family that Dad and my two brothers, my older brother and my younger brother, ended up going to as participants, and then I helped staff as well.
Yeah, I'm an analytical. I needed multiple data points.
All right, so Kevin, what was it like for you? So you had Nathaniel. He went on this weekend. He said it was great. As a parent, it's hard to see your kid struggle, right? So knowing that he was in the midst of some of these struggles, he had this weekend experience and said this was great. But then, ran into more struggles, moved away, COVID happened, had to work through some of that, and then moved back home. So you saw Nathaniel's experience and then your son-in-law's experience. So I know you and I had talked previously, and you said you were skeptical for a while. Is that correct?
Oh, that would be an understatement. Yeah.
All right. Well, tell us some more about this skepticism.
Yeah, and just maybe to set a little bit of context, I've been inside Nathan's story that he shared for a while, and it's still hard to hear.
Sorry.
It's okay. So Nathan went off to school. So if I go back a little bit, Nathan is the middle of 7. He's the second of 4 boys, and my middle boy. And when, we had a great relationship, and then the teen years hit and it got hard. And if I'm honest, I own most of that hard, I believe. In retrospect, I think, he was being a normal teenager and normal struggles, and I wasn't being the dad I think that he needed. And fortunately, by the time he was in his late teens, he and I had both kind of acknowledged that brokenness and just made a really intentional decision to work on it together, and did so successfully, I believe, and continue to do so. And so by the time he had gone off to sunset, we were in a pretty good place, father, son, lots of respect. I mean, I have a ton of respect for Nathan, and he's actually, I characterize Nathan as one of the few people in my life that is my early go-to for wisdom. And so when I need wisdom, I have my wife and I have others, but I have Nathan, and I do go to him frequently. And so he went, and I saw this energy around it. And so that, was obviously, I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm glad you were excited about it. And I immediately started researching, and it's hard to research Crucible. There's not a lot out there, and for, intentionally. And so that just had all my red flags going off. And Nathan and I are very different. I mentioned I'm a skeptical analytical. I'm an accountant, CPA. It's what I do. And I'm an ex-auditor and ex-law enforcement. So you can just imagine my skepticism is high. And Nathan's is low. Nathan's everything's out there. You just felt it. He's I definitely say Nathan's probably, I don't know, I'm not more mom, but he's definitely different than I am. And so I know he's that way, and I respect it. But I know we're different. And so he's coming back really enthusiastic, and he's gently starting to encourage me and work on me. And so I start trying to do my own research, and I can't find anything. And I'm thinking, no, this is not good. Like, my son just got into a cult. What do I do? And like, how do I respond to this? And so I just, he kept gently pushing. I just kept gently pushing back. And that, Nathan, probably went on 3 years.
Yeah.
And so he came back and settled back in St. Louis and got involved with the staffing weekend. And it was actually several men, including one of my son-in-laws, that went from church. And the son-in-law that went is an engineer and is equally probably more skeptical than I am. And
Yeah.
another guy who's a family friend, member of our church, young man, equally as skeptical, like high skeptic. And I forget, there might have been one other person, I think. Yeah, one other person that I'm not real close to. But
Oh, yeah.
anyways,
Yep.
so, you know, I just kept kind of pushing Nathan off, and then they all went, and Nathan kept in, and I'm like, okay, this is something he really wants me to do. I don't feel a moving to do it, but I love Nathan, and so I started talking to the other guys, like, tell me about your experience. Well, they couldn't, deeply, but they would tell me go. And when both of them said, yeah, you need to go. There's going to be things you may not enjoy, but you should go. You'll be all right. And I was like, okay, that helped. And I remember standing in church after service one day, and Nathan, you and I were in the back, and I said, son, I'm going to go. And this, by the time this was going to be up in St. Charles. And I said, I'm going to go. I don't really feel the need. I don't know why I'm going, other than I'm going because you want me to, and I love you. And I commit to you that I will be all in, because my skepticism could really hold me back. And I said, I'm not good at this. I'm not good at this openness, transparency stuff, but I'm all in. And I just promise you I'll be all in, because he was staffing that weekend. So the weekend I went, he was staff back in November of last year. And it ended up that his fourth brother is adopted, and he's only 8. So obviously he's not ready for Crucible. But the 2 other adult children also decided to go. So we ended up, without really planning it, that all of us ended up in our Crucible weekend together, Nathan as staff and me and the other boys as participants. And I'll just say this, what I realized at the end was I was kind of ashamed of myself when it was all done, because I realized courage for me is a really important value. And it's something inside the Crucible accountability, and being courageous and being transparent and vulnerable. And I realized that I had been a coward, that I had let younger men go before me, and I wasn't willing to go until they told me it was okay. And that wasn't okay. And I felt really bad about that, but it all worked out. It worked out. God got me there in a roundabout way through good people. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Let's talk for just a minute about the fact that these men that went on the weekend and came home and said, I can't tell you much. I can just tell you how it impacted me. I can say my husband went in 2012, and now we have Women's Crucible, but we didn't at the time. What do you mean you can't tell me? Like, this is this again, that, like, what did you get yourself into?
Right.
Question. So what I want to know from you, being on both sides of it, the side of not knowing what it's about, and then also finally going, if they had told you, imagine for a minute that they told you everything that happened on the weekend, how do you think that would have impacted the way that you showed up? How would that have impacted your decision to even go?
Yeah. And that's the weird part for me, is just acknowledging that confidentiality is absolutely critical to a successful weekend.
Yeah.
Had they shared with me any of the experiences beforehand, and that I had been mentally able to prepare for or I would have just put up my barriers. I would have just, the walls would have been tall and thick at that point. And because, again, not going into detail, there are some things that I was, when they were described, I'm like, nope. Yep, nope. And then I promised Nathan I'm going to lean in 100%, and I did. And I was glad I did. It was transformational. So, yeah, I think that, and what's really funny is I shared with you in the last conversation we had, my wife actually went the weekend before me. So there was a week between hers and mine. And I was just trying so hard to get information from her. Like, you're my wife. You have to tell me this. We're one flesh. Come on. And she's like, she wouldn't do it. She'd give me little hints, like, just be prepared. But she was, she honored the confidentiality. I was so frustrated with her. But in retrospect, it's absolutely critical. It's such an important part, because you have to be able to go. If I tell anybody, it's the same thing when I encourage people to go, I'm going to say, I can't really tell you much about it. I can point you to some resources. It'll be helpful. All I can do is tell you to trust the process. Just trust the process. And because you trust me, you just have to, that's what I did. I just trusted Nathan. I knew Nathan wouldn't do anything that would hurt me or lead me astray, or I had full confidence. And so I just had to trust the one I loved. And I think a lot of people that end up going to Crucible just need to trust the one they love that's encouraging them to go. It's okay. It's okay. It's powerful, and it's okay.
Yeah, I can second what Dad said, because for me, if I had known any of the details over the weekend, I don't think we would be having this conversation. I don't think I would have gone. I would have laughed off those men who were trying to get me to go, and I would have been further persuaded in what, I was wrestling with concerning things like accountability due to the experiences that were very real that I had gone through, but not knowing that the Crucible would be a different experience.
Yeah. Well, I think you both bring just such a beautiful point to all of this. Just trust the process. It's an unknown. It's not because we're a cult. We're not trying to hoodwink anybody into doing something they don't want to do. But when you trust the process, when you go all in, transformation can happen, and a beautiful community can come from the other side of it, right?
Yeah, that somebody I loved years and years ago shared something with me, and I share it frequently, is that they told me joy lies on the other side of fear. And you just got to get through the fear.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's talk about that joy for just a minute here. So I know Nathaniel shared a little bit about what life was like after his weekend. So Kevin, I'd love to hear from you as well. What did you walk away from the weekend with? What did you learn about yourself, and what kind of joy have you discovered on the other side of that fear?
Yeah, I think one of the primary things that it did for me is it created an even more common language and common experience with the men that I love that have been. That I much deeper, like the one son-in-law and I, we love each other, but I wouldn't characterize us as super close. He's married to my middle daughter, and who I am and have always been very close to. So he and I are closer. We have a common language and a transparency and a vulnerability with one another that we didn't have before. Part of the connection that made Nathan was critical in creating was and I'll let him speak about it, but he created this group, Band of Brothers, and it was really the people that had been through Crucible. And it's a pretty big group. There's Nathan, 8 people at our 8 men, and more than that, like 8 or 12
it's like 9
men
10,
and women
12,
at our church. And we're only a 100-member congregation.
Oh, yeah, not including the women. The women.
Yeah, if you count the women, like
low
10 or 12, 14, something like that. And
wow.
So I have daughters-in-law that have been through. I have son-in-laws that have been through. My sons have been through. My wife has been through. And so our whole family and a lot of our church family has this common language and common experience that just draws us so much closer. And it's a little, there's kind of a flip side to it, that there are other people at our church that haven't been through it, that see that and don't understand it fully. And we respect that. And I think have that kind of same potentially cultish perspective, and it's okay. We'll get through it. It's no big deal, but it's there. It's almost like we just want, we're inviting, and you're like, come on, it's okay. You can be part of this closeness. And so we actually have a signal chat where we do sachet, check in with each other. And so just an emotional check-in. And, we don't all do it every day, but we do it frequently enough that we know what's going on in each other's lives, and we can support one another. My relationship with my wife is, I'm married almost 40 years, and great relationship, always has been, but it's deeper. And there's just kind of this, again, it's a common language, peacefulness that comes from the shared experience. I think it's really hard for me to articulate, but it's real. I would say in the last year, there's been this peacefulness to our relationship, and there's other work going on, and I have other work going on, but I think it's really contributed to it.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Nathaniel, how about you? Your dad mentioned the Band of Brothers group that you got together. What was it like trying to pull these people together? Once everyone went through the weekend, did you find it was hard to get them on board with having this community, or were they ready to jump in?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. It's actually interesting how it went down, because whenever I moved back from Seattle, Washington to Missouri, just due to some of the things I had gone through in Seattle, I knew I needed camaraderie, I needed fellowship with fellow men. And so I went to individuals in my church that I knew were in a very similar spiritual place as me, feeling frustrated, feeling kind of stuck in a rut in their faith and in their spirit. And so I just went to them and said, "Hey, this is what I'm thinking about starting. I'm thinking about starting this kind of Band of Brothers thing." And so the Band of Brothers actually is what kind of got started first within our church body. And then once I got wind that the Crucible was doing a St. Louis retreat, I said, "Guys, you've got to go to this. If you think what we're doing is creating a deeper sense of intimacy with each other and just fellowship and being able to have this kind of common language, you've got to go to this weekend experience because it's going to really challenge you to go deeper." And when they came back, that really kind of sparked a lot of, I think, understanding behind the Band of Brothers and added this really dynamic element to the Band of Brothers. So it's kind of interesting. It was kind of weird. We still actually have some members in the Band of Brothers who haven't gone to the Crucible Project weekend, but are still kind of involved in this very deep, fellowship that's been largely benefited by the Crucible Project weekend. So I'm excited for when their time comes. As a group, we're very sensitive, like Dad was saying, for those of us who have gone through the weekend, very sensitive about not sharing any details about the weekend because we don't want to rob them of their experience. But that doesn't mean we can't share in a deeper fellowship with them and a deeper camaraderie with them if they're hungry for it, and they are, And so if anyone's interested in that deeper camaraderie and deeper fellowship, even if they don't go to the weekend, we still will walk with them and encourage them in that. That's one thing that I've been trying really hard to just not let the impression, because I used to have it, right? That outward impression of looking at the Crucible and saying, "Oh, this is a cult." I don't want to validate that in any kind of way. So actually, my approach when people say it sounds like a cult, my approach to responding to that is actually to laugh and say, "It is. It's the most. It is the most receptive and inclusive cult you'll ever be a part of."
Well, I refer to it as a tribe. For me, the
it's a tribe
concept is less it's less stressful. We're just a tribe, and tribes just have shared experiences and shared values, right? And the other thing for me is that the values for Crucible are not confidential. Vulnerability, accountability, transparency, those are universal biblical values. The mechanics are confidential because they're powerful mechanics on how you get people to go there, to those places. And so that's how I try to approach it with the people. I try to articulate the values and the power of the values, but not get into the mechanics and not get into the specifics of how Crucible works because of what Nathan just said. I don't want to ruin it for anybody. It's pretty crazy.
Exactly. I think for me, one of the biggest joys that I got out to just inviting the church body into the Crucible and inviting those men who are part of the Band of Brothers and, the women, their wives, the sisters that are affiliated with that band, bringing them to the Crucible as well, just inviting people into that. One of the biggest joys I got out of it actually was my wife finally having a chance to go through herself. She went on the same weekend, Women's Weekend, as my mother and some of the ladies from our church. And so her coming back after like 5 years of me going to my first weekend, coming back after like 5 years and saying, "I finally understand some of how you talk now. I finally understand." And just having that kind of shared experience to really be able to relate and understand with each other has definitely fostered a deeper relationship with my wife that is just an overwhelming blessing. If I already thought that I was overwhelmingly blessed with my dad and my brothers going through the weekend and just having that experience to share with them, but having my wife having had her gone through it as well, it's just the blessings just keep getting better,
Yeah. So, as we wrap up, I know you had shared previously that on Sunday of the retreat, one of the activities that we do is a place to connect with one another. And so you, as a father and 3 sons, 2 brothers, a dad, like you all got to connect during that time together on this retreat. Can you just tell me a little bit about what that was like, and both for you and then for the other men in the room?
Yeah, this is where I got to hold it together.
You and me both.
So yeah, and again, respecting the not going into too much detail. There's an opportunity to connect with other men that are in the Crucible weekend in a very unique way, and you have no idea going in what it's going to be. And Nathan, as a staff member, was able to pull a few strings, I think, and coordinate this activity so that he and I and Luke and Andrew got to do it together. And honestly, probably other than the birth of each of them, probably the most beautiful moments I've had with my boys ever. It's hard to describe the, just the feeling of forgiveness and closeness. And then what I didn't realize, and what others described to us that were there, in our group, in the whole group, is, and everybody's there with different issues, right? They're all doing stuff, and the blessing, I didn't realize this, but the blessing it was for other men to see a healthy relationship between a father and his sons, and sons and their father, and sons with one another as siblings that are 12 years apart at the most extreme, was I think an unintended consequence. It was beautiful. It'll be a memory I'll cherish forever. And all 4 of us have done another weekend together, and we all did that one as participants rather than staff. So it was that powerful that we decided to do another weekend together. One of the other weekends on stressing a different topic. So yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to describe, but it was one of the most powerful moments of my life with my children, for sure, and a blessing. And I will be eternally grateful to Nathan for making it happen.
Nathaniel, how about you? How was that experience for you?
It's hard for me to put to words. The best way I can describe it for myself is like I had fulfilled part of my God-given mandate in being on this earth by being a part of that moment. Just sharing and being a part of intimacy between my father and my brothers, and honestly the other men in that room, like Dad was saying, that came up to me afterwards and had conversations, the fellow staff men that came up to me and had conversations with me about it afterwards. It felt like an aspect of my soul was satisfied, to the point where if the Lord had taken me on the drive home after that weekend, I would have been at peace with the thought, because I was so just fed with the thought of, this is why I am here. This is a part of my purpose on this earth, and this is the kind of unearthly blessing, divine blessing that we can partake in while on this earth, and it's just a foretaste of what's to come.
Oh, it's so good. So good. Yeah, a lot of what we do on the weekend is looking at some of those messages that we've carried with us our whole lives, take a look at what's working and what's not working, and identifying where some of those things first started to show up for us. And for so many, the messages that they carry into adulthood are things that they got as a kid, whether it was something explicitly said to them or just something they picked up on from being around. And it seems like a lot of the place of that wounding is often that parental relationship or the sibling relationship, right? Because those are the people that you're with the most and you expect the most from. So just hearing each of you share about an opportunity to speak life into one another as a father and son relationship and that sibling relationship, and bring that blessing to one another. and not just do it for each other, but have other people in the room see that being modeled in a healthy way. Man, what a gift. What a gift. Before we sign off, I want to see, do either of you have any last thoughts that you want to share? Anything about your experience or what Crucible has been?
It's really interesting for me. There's been work I've been doing, I work for a wonderful people-centric company. And so leadership work that's very consistent with the stuff in Crucible, values-based. I work for a wonderful company that has wonderful values. And so I've been doing a lot of work over the last 10 years just on my own leadership as not just a professional, but as a father and a husband. And so Crucible was just like icing on the cake for me. I think it was easier because of the work I'd already been doing. It would have been probably harder, and it was still really hard. I would go back to trust the process and just launch out in faith. There was, again, without going into detail, there was one time during the weekend where I was convinced I couldn't do something, and I just decided to do it. And it was a tipping point for me. It was transformational. I did not see it coming. And Nathan knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's actually on the first night. And after that happened, I realized, okay, this is legit. Like I did not see this coming. And I just leaned in even harder at that point because I just felt the transformational effect of that, just that moment. And that's never been something I've really experienced before. And so trust the process, trust the people that love you, that are encouraging you to go. It'll be okay. You're not going to break. You'll survive. It's all okay. And everybody I know that I've remained connected with that came out of it was glad they were there. I believe that.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So for me, I think what I would say is the Crucible Project in my mind, for me, it's not the solution. It is a tool that can lead you and point you very powerfully to the solution. Because as Paul said, I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to the Jew first and then to the Gentile. And so for me, the Crucible is a very invaluable tool on my tool belt, my spiritual tool belt, that allows me to encourage people and point people to the power of the gospel of Jesus Christ, because that's ultimately the solution. And if you go to the weekend with that understanding that there is a God and that he sent his son because he deeply loves you, and that son was hung on a cross to forgive you and redeem you back to him, and you go seeking that God and seeking to know him, then absolutely God can and will, I believe, use the Crucible Project weekend as a very valuable experience to aid you in that seeking him.
So you're probably starting to see why he's a source of wisdom for me.
Preach, man. This is awesome. You hit the nail on the head. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. This has been such a gift to me just to hear your story. Honestly, as you've been sharing, I'm thinking about my own sister, my own mom, my dad, and just thinking, I want that for my family. Like I said, my husband is a Crucible man, but there's more. It can't just end with he and I. We got to get more people on board in our family because I want to have that experience together. So thank you for that motivation, that encouragement. Thank you for your willingness to attend, engage in your own journey, and then just share a little bit of that with me today. It's been a gift. So thank you both.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you, Joy. Yes, thank you.
All right. Well, we'll sign off for now. Until next time.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Also, don't forget to check out myjourney2.com for your free 2-week trial. That's myjourneyto.com. Thank you for listening.